Well, Joe, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us to talk about big data and Hadoop. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us about your role and what you do at EMC, that would be great.
Sure. My name is Joe DosSantos, and I'm the Director of Professional Services related to big data in EMC.
So in your role, I imagine you run into a lot of great success stories relative to big data and Hadoop. Could you talk a little bit about what you see organizations doing in general and what you see as the business value of Hadoop?
Sure. Traditionally, organizations have struggled with the organization of data within a data warehouse being too rigid to manage. And the ability of Hadoop, the real secret sauce there, is to allow people access to unlimited streams of unlimited kinds of data, structured data, unstructured data, text, video, whatever. And so the power that people are unleashing here is the ability to get at that data in the raw quickly and consume it to derive business value through analytical insights. And sometimes those insights are for the furtherance of marketing effectiveness, segmentation down to the one as opposed to the group of people. So really interesting advancements in marketing segmentation of customers, really interesting advancements of taking advantage of the Internet of Things. So how are devices out in the field talking to us, and what can we derive from the messages that those things are sending back? So examples include smart meters and utilities, and how people are able to capitalize on the information provided through smart meters, or internet signals and traffic that people are having, or mobile devices that people are carrying. And really, the secret is to unleash that information, to feedback a loop, to help people exploit those things within the context of business decisions or customer decisions. So how can I actually use analytics, deep analytics about a person to help them understand a little bit more about themselves and their desires and their buying behaviors, make better decisions that help the company and the individual a little bit better. And all that's really anchored around the idea of Hadoop's ability to give information much more freely and in a much more quick and accessible way in conventional data warehousing, which is cumbersome to get the information into.
That makes a lot of sense, Joe. So it's interesting you talk about the use of Hadoop to be able to store all this great data and allow people to derive insights from it. Could you talk about what you see as the technical challenges relative to managing the data lake, where all data is supposedly stored and used later on by data scientists and data analysts?
So Hadoop is great for storing information. However, it's often difficult to access that information because it is not as pasteurized, if you will, or not as organized as you might find in the data warehouse. So as a result, it's really easy to get data into Hadoop, but it's not always as easy to get data out of Hadoop. And so you're relying on a number of skills you haven't had to have traditionally to get that information out of Hadoop. So I think that data science is getting a lot of press for that. How do you have a person be able to assemble lots of different kinds of data and make sense of things and make correlations of that data? But one of the things that isn't necessarily getting as much play in the marketplace is data semantics. If I put 1,000 different sources into an environment, how can I actually allow a person to see what those 1,000 sources are and to make sense of them and to correlate different parts of the data universe together? So how can I help that data scientist be more productive? So in terms of trying to get the right skills in place, I think it's really important, A, to get data science skills to be able to correlate, but B, to be able to look at data governance a little bit different way. How do we actually help people understand what's in that Hadoop environment and help them construct the schemas that they need when they need them and how they need it? So you'll remember that Hadoop is really a different kind of model because a data warehouse is schema on write, whereas Hadoop is schema on read. How do we help that person create the schema that they need by understanding the data content that's in that Hadoop cluster?
That makes a lot of sense, Joe. Can you elaborate a little bit more about, if you had a magic wand, what would you recommend that from a technology perspective be done to really enable this data self-service and data governance that you just talked about, in particular in the context of the semantics and the schemas?
So there's an interesting paradigm that I think most people are adopting around IT as a service. Most people, when they order a computer or a phone from IT, they go to a portal. They can provision and choose the device that they want, and then that device will come to them automatically without human intervention, and that their cost center will be charged for that device. We envision something very similar for data. Why can't you go to an enterprise portal and select the data that you need and be able to go and grab that data that's secured according to role-based security, just as you would secure anything else, get the data that you need, and then have your cost center charge for the data that you consume. So the vision there would be data as a service, hands-free access to the data universe of your enterprise. In order to imagine that happening, though, that portal would need to really understand what that data means and where it can be found. And that is really the magic wand that I would wave. How would I be able to understand the contents of 1,000 data sources I am? Not that it's a var chart 40 and it's FL_name, but that this thing means first name and this other thing means first name. These things are correlated. The structured data is correlated. This unstructured data is correlated. I can find this kind of information in this kind of environment. I would want some kind of an automated tagging capability, automated metadata discovery capability that would help me navigate that massive volume of data. That's the hard part of big data. From there, then we can start to do very interesting things with that data, but the first step is understanding how to get access to that data.
Thank you, Joe. It's interesting when you think about what companies are doing today. Everyone seems to be jumping in the lake, no pun intended, with Hadoop. Based upon what you've seen, what would be your words of wisdom for a big data architect or a chief data officer who's been charged by the business to drive value out of Hadoop? Based upon what you just said, the need for a better understanding of the data and so forth, what would you recommend that they do once they've got Hadoop in-house and they've selected their distribution? What would you recommend that they do?
I think there are two different things that every CIO is going to need to do to be successful in this world of big data. The first is to make sure that they're intimately connected with real business problems. You can be a hospital looking for patient outcomes. You can be a school system looking for student performance. You can be, and the correlations of different things to affect that performance. There are many, many different scenarios. You need to understand them, and you need to be laser sharp focused on getting outcomes in those scenarios. And then as you start to become more successful in these scenarios, the lake itself will become bigger and bigger and add more and more value to the enterprise. So that's part one, is staying connected to the enterprise value. Part two is being able to develop something that's going to be enterprise ready to extend beyond those first 2 and 3 use cases into all the use cases that will come their way. And in order to do that, you need the ability to scale up your cluster, you need infrastructural skills, and you need the ability to govern that Hadoop environment with the semantics. You need to be able to understand what the contents are of that data lake and expose them to your business consumers so they can turn that around very, very quickly. So there's a famous expression that you need to think globally, act locally. This is the same thing. We need to think globally in terms of how do we think of a Hadoop instance that can add value for any use case that you can imagine within your enterprise. And in order to do that, you need to be able to provide value and insight into all the different content that your lake provides. At the same time, you need to be able to zero in on those different sources that are going to provide a direct shot in the arm for business value today, right now, and enable value in that particular area, and create a program that focuses on moving from one problem to another.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Joe. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Elder.